Hi, hi, hi. Hi, everybody. Happy Wednesday. I hope you are doing great. I know a lot of people right now are going through a lot of changes in their lives and businesses. And I just want to say, I see you, I am you, I'm making some changes here as well. And, or changes, changes happening. I feel very co-creative with change these days. But anyway, I'm just wanting to acknowledge, I know there's a lot of change happening. People with kids are getting ready to send their kids back to school. A lot of my clients have taken the summer off or done like sort of a partial work schedule this summer, and just whatever's going on with the energy on the planet right now. There's just a lot of change. If you're live, say hi. I'd love to say hi back. And I'd love to know what's going on in your business, how this resonates with you. But so we're talking about pivoting today because it's the work that I do, but it's also my business is pivoting. It's going to be more of an internal pivot than an external pivot, but it's still no less important. And I want to talk a little bit about pivoting today, and particularly what I call my pivot strategy. And you're going to have to adjust it for yourself. You guys know me, I'm not like a formula person, but I think it's really important when you're going through a pivot or you're feeling a pivot coming. And I want to just really quickly say, like, a pivot in your business can just be as simple as I'm ready to scale to the next level, impact and income, right? It can just be that simple. I'm ready to take this business to its next level. I'm ready to use my gifts at a greater level of potential. So it can just simply be that you're ready to grow to the next level or scale to the next level. That to me is still a pivot. I think in the online space, when people talk about pivots, they think of like, not a massive change to your business, but something that it's a pivot, a shift or an adjustment. Like, I want to serve a new audience. Now, whether that's going to be pivoting from one type of audience to another, or whether you're just going to be opening up to a second, so quote unquote audience, right? That's important. If you have a new type of service or offering or modality that you want to highlight, it could even just be refining your messaging and landing on some language that feels like it resonates more deeply with what you're doing now. So pivoting can be all kinds of things. And to be honest, I would even argue that a pivot can even be like pivoting of your time and energy, right? Like, I have been working with lots of clients over the last couple of years to help them navigate owning more than one business. And what does that look like, right? Because if you go from running one business to running two, or having a transitional period in between where you're running one, you're ultimately going to run the second, but you've got the space in between where you're doing both. And everything in between, sort of what that looks like, that's a pivot. That's a pivot in terms of how you spend your time, right? So that can even be a pivot. And I think one of the things that I find myself doing with a lot of my clients is looking at how they're spending their time. And that alone can be a pivot, right? Like I said, if you had a summer schedule to manage family and kid responsibilities and just being able to spend more time with your kids this summer, that's a pivot, right? Like, we can call a pivot anything you want, and pivot can be anything you want. And so I just want to open that up to you as we're talking about pivoting today, because you may be pivoting and you may not have defined it that way for yourself. So a pivot can just be an adjustment or a small change. It can also be, and is always, a part of a bigger change, right? So again, like, I would say, if you're moving from business number one to business number two, that's a pretty damn big change, right? But there are oftentimes pivots that lead to those bigger changes or smaller pieces that make up that change. So Just being a little bit loose with our definition of pivoting. And also, I think, like, let's not underestimate the concept of pivoting your mindset. You can make a mindset shift, and that can dramatically affect your business and sort of create a natural pivot. And natural pivots happen all the time. And I think sometimes pivots happen where we're not aware of it. And then we kind of look back in time and go, oh, I sort of like, these are the people I'm working with now, or this is the kind of work I'm just sort of organically doing now. It's pivoted a little bit. It's changed a little bit. It's evolved a little bit over time. And then sometimes it's a conscious pivot. It's like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do this, or I want to do this. I don't want to only do this anymore. I want to do this and this other thing. Right. And sometimes it's, when we talk about like adding a service or adding an audience, a different type of audience, it could even be like, I want to now finally add that podcast. Right. So things like that, write the book, whatever it is. And then we're talking about pivoting strategies today, or a pivoting strategy, or a way to think of your pivot strategy. The other thing I want to really encourage you to do is simply to have a strategy for your pivot. It's really important. It's really important to really just honor yourself in your transition, in the change, in the pivot, in the like, it's just time for a little adjustment. Honoring yourself in that, and knowing that that's normal. Running a business is a creative process, even though we don't always like to act like it is. It's a creative process. And so you will be evolving over time, no matter what you do, even if your business model always looks the same and the work that you do looks the same for 30 years, which very few people do. Even within that, your business something will shift and evolve over time with your business. So just recognizing that you're in a pivot, or that you might be in a pivot, is I think really important when you're creating one consciously. And then to recognize that it's important to have a pivot strategy. So one of the things that I find slows people down the most when they're pivoting is a lack of time to spend on the pivot, or lack of creative space to really understand what's happening, because sometimes very consciously, like, I don't want to do this and I do want to do that now. But sometimes it's like, we talked about this last week, sometimes it's really flipping messy, guys. Like, this, but you don't know that, and this, but you're trying to figure out that, and it can feel messy, and it's supposed to feel messy. It's not supposed to feel formulaic or linear. So let yourself off the hook there. But knowing, so I know that sounds silly to be like, it's messy, so have a strategy. Okay, what the F, Laura? Like, how do you have a strategy for something that's messy? That's what we're going to talk about today. But one of the things I see slows so many people down in their pivot is they stay in that space of confusion, messiness, all of that for so long that they start to fatigue and either just go back to where they were because they can't flip and stand it, or they flip quickly to something, not really knowing if that's the thing, but they just can't sit in the in-between this any longer, right? And neither of those are wrong, but most people are pivoting from a really heart-centered place and a space of, I find that fulfillment drives most of our pivots. And so if you're not feeling as lit up by something and it's time to add a little something, tweak a little something, do a little something differently, it's really important to honor that. And so having a pivot strategy, having some space in your day to allow the clarity to come in is honestly, like, if you hear nothing else today, that is probably the easiest thing that you can do in your business to support the pivot. Because we talked a lot about last week, leaning into the messiness, and I'm a little bit talking about the opposite of that, but it's really a dance and a balance. Around letting the messiness come, because there's clarity in the mess, right? These weird ideas, we are like, why would I do that? Why did I just have this idea about doing that? Like, there's something there, right? So leaning in and leaning into the messiness and letting the messiness come. And also, frankly, like, strategically creating space for that we talked about last week, leaning into the messiness, that gives you space to actually move through it quicker. So having a strategy is really important. And I'm going to talk about really two elements I think are important to having to how you put a pivot strategy together for yourself, so that you can move through it with, again, it's going to feel messy, but so that you can move through it without spending so much time in the mess. The mess is really important. I think the diamonds are in the mess. And you gotta allow that. And when you don't know how to navigate the mess, this is one of the things that I help my clients with. And it's really important, you guys, if you need a coach, I have a spot open right now. I also encourage you to have a business bestie, or if you already have a coach or you're looking for a coach, you can talk to me. I also have other people, like I'm not the coach for everybody, but get a coach, get a business bestie, get somebody who can be a sounding board for your ideas, will also help with your clarity. But leaning into that mess, right? So having a strategy that allows you to lean into the mess will help you move through it faster. It's like one of those, like when you just flip and accept something, then you stop resisting it, and then you can just deal with the topic at hand, and it's actually faster. Okay, let me know if this is resonating. I'm seeing several of you guys live, but I don't see any comments. So I'm just going to make sure here that I'm not missing you, because last week I didn't see any comments, and the comments came after I shut down. So sorry. It's just how Facebook is sometimes. Okay, so having a pivot strategy, really important. Okay. Two elements to what I would suggest should be in your pivot strategy. Number one, first off, take a deep breath. Create some space. I feel like I want to say that really quietly. Create space for yourself. Going through a pivot is like adding a task or a project to your business. And not treating it as such is not honoring the pivot, and it's just going to slow you down. So first things first, just like when you need to clean out a closet, and reorganize, let me say it this way, when you need to reorganize a closet, isn't the first step that you do is you start to pull out stuff, right? Or like maybe you look at it and you go, okay, what can definitely be in the way? What's definitely going to Goodwill? What's definitely got to be tossed in the trash can? What can I give to a friend? What in this closet do I already know is just I know it's a no. We don't need to create space for this because it's a no, right? So create space in your calendar. This is a very tactical thing to do, but it will also help you recognize sort of, there's two ways so I've got a little sub bullet here. There's two ways that I'm talking about creating space. First off, create space in your calendar. If you don't already have space in your day dedicated to creativity in your business, please do that for yourself right now. That alone will change the trajectory of your business. And that alone, I promise you, will add to your fulfillment levels pretty much instantly. Make sure you have space in your day, preferably every day, but make sure you have space at least in the week for your creativity, and that it is a non-negotiable block of time where you're not interrupted, where you're free to be creative around your business. You can decide sort of what your tasks are within that, or if my tasks are nothingness. I have a journal next to me, and I have no expectation of myself. I sometimes naturally decide to journal. I sometimes naturally decide to zone out and stare into space. I sometimes naturally listen to something. But number one, creating space for creativity on your calendar. Preferably daily, definitely weekly. And then the other way to create space is just to see what's in your business, what's going on in your business right now that you could either take a break from or stop doing for the purpose of creating space. So space in your time, in your calendar creates space in your head. And so you're going to need time to actively process this pivot. And you may find yourself going, oh, I'm thinking about this. I'm going to jot this down and I'm going to call a friend and you know, brainstorm about it. And I'm going to like, you may find that like active, but then there's sort of a like an inactive brain space that when your brain is so full, when your day is so full with tasks and busyness, and you don't have any nothingness or just little buffers of time in between your work, it's just going to make it really hard, much harder for your brain to be creative and inspirational around this next thing. So it's adding creative space and then also seeing what's going on in your business that, especially if you know, like I'm pivoting from X to Y, what in X can you just go ahead and start saying, you know, I'm not going to do that anymore, right? And it can be something small, like I love my lives, but right, like if you go live every week and something doesn't feel right, I'm not going anywhere. But like maybe it's take your lives off the plate for a few weeks just to create that extra hour in your day, right? Or whatever it is. If something's not resonating, if something feels like it needs to change, if you're already aware that like the way I do this isn't going to be the way that I do it anymore, maybe you can pause it for a minute. Maybe you don't need to do it at all, right? So just take a little stock. It's not something you need to spend a whole lot of time on, but I bet if you just kind of look at the major nuts and bolts of projects and what you're doing in your business, you might be aware of like, yeah, that's a place that I could either stop or play around with stopping, right? I could just pause it for a little while, and that would create space for me to allow in the creativity. That would give me a little bit of space in my day so that I can move through this pivot with more grace, so that I can move through this pivot with more clarity and less confusion and messiness. And so that I can move through this pivot, frankly, faster and get to the other side so that I know what to do with that thing. So highly, highly, highly recommend creating space, both in terms of what doesn't need to be done or what could be paused, and then just making sure that you have sufficient creative space in your day. I have daily creative space for myself, but I've actually increased it recently because I find myself just needing more and more and more and more and more of that time. And I'm finding that time to be super, super productive for me and what I'm creating in my business next. So give yourself the space. A lot of my clients have taken a lot of time off recently, and that's really, really important. Maybe you just need to take a week off. Maybe you need to take 2 weeks off. Maybe you need to take more. Like sometimes it's just halting and stopping and pausing something. Even if you don't know like what you're creating, that pause, that extra brain space, doing a little less for a little while. Again, that could just be a few weeks, it could be a few months, but doing a little less of your regular day-to-day status quo will support you in figuring out where you need to shift. Okay, so number one, please have a pivot strategy. Number two, part of your pivot strategy gets to be, and I kind of want to say it that way, like you get to have more creative space. And that's why, I don't know if you saw the promotion, my post about this on Facebook and Instagram. I find this to be so freeing because when you're in the middle of a pivot, what nobody likes to talk about is sometimes what's driving that pivot is, ooh, I have this cool thing I want to do, podcast, book, second business, open up to a different audience, new service, new, like whatever, right? Sometimes that's what's driving you. But sometimes you guys, what's driving you is, ugh, this feels heavy. And I've had several conversations with people, especially over the last month or two, about like, I'm afraid I'm falling out of love with my business. I'm afraid I don't love my work as much as I used to, or as much as I could. And I don't know how to shift that. It's really flipping personal. It's really important. And nobody's talking about like what happens when you're feeling like resentful. I talk a lot about how resentment can be your number one teacher in business. Because if we are over time, I'm not saying you have to do this on a like weekly or even monthly basis, but maybe on a twice yearly basis, even yearly basis, we are required, I think, to evolve and grow over time. And so when you find yourself resentful of something, that's your clue to pay attention. It doesn't mean you have to burn your business down. It doesn't mean anything's wrong. It just means you're a human. And my dears, it means you're a creative. People aren't talking enough about, I think, about how running a business is a creative process. Your business is a work of art. And we don't, you know, I always like to say, like, if you were watching a painter paint, would you be like, oh, hey, like you dropped 3 drops of red on the floor there. Are you going to pick that up? Or, ooh, that brush stroke is much bigger than the last brush stroke. Like, what is that supposed to like look like something? I don't know what it's supposed to look like. What is that? Right? Like, we would never say that to an artist because we understand that painting is like an organic evolving process. And a painting, in fact, how many reels have you watched on Instagram of an artist creating a painting? And when you're watching the first part of the reel, you don't know what the hell you're looking at, right? And then you get to the end and you're like, oh my God, like that's a beautiful abstract piece, or oh my God, I had no idea that was going to become the ocean or a lion face or whatever, right? Or a tree. We don't judge it when it's art, but we judge it when it's us, and we judge it when we think, you know, business absolutely has a tangible and a practical and a strategic and a tactical element to it. And we get, you know, tangible money in return. And we put like content out and we put tangible programs and products out into the world. But the process is artistic. The process is creative. And so when you have that space to enable yourself to go through this, when you have the space to say, oh my God, I'm worried that I don't love this thing as much as I feel like I am so in love with my business and I love to change it. But I sometimes also find that there is a little bit of a grieving process when you change something, because I love my business so much. Like, it is my baby, right? And so allowing yourself to not only be driven by that, which is inspiring you to pivot, but also letting it be okay that the stuff that feels heavy, the stuff that feels, dare I say, resentful, the stuff that feels like, ugh, I just don't love this as much as I used to. It doesn't mean that that you will not love it again, but it does mean that something is required. Sometimes it's just a matter of changing I swear to God, sometimes it's just a matter of changing your schedule around. But it does mean that something needs your attention. Somebody's, you know, in your business is raising its hand and saying, like, can you make this tweak here and this tweak there? And when we don't create space in our calendars for that creativity, or just for the like, what do I want to do with this? What, like, leaning into the what doesn't feel good, the resentment, the heavierness, I might be falling out of love with this, and leaning into the creativity, the inspiration, the stuff that you know you want to do next, or leaning into what's still working, will start to get you moving forward. Okay, so that's number one. And then number two, so creating space in your calendar for all of these things to happen. And then number two, and this is the flipping fun part, you guys, this is the part that I was talking about in my post about this. Like, this is what makes me feel liberated in my business. And this is what makes me, I think it's also this like sort of concept is frankly what drew me to entrepreneurship in the first place. And I find that the people that I work with tend to be highly creative, whether they're aware of it or not, really big thinkers. They've got a big impact, a big vision, a big mission that they want to create in the world. A lot of deep fulfillment and enjoyment in the craft that they do. And a lot of like independent, feisty, fiercely independent, rebellious people who just want to like flip shit on its head and create stuff in the world. And so this is for you, you guys. This is where it gets really juicy. This is where it gets really freeing and liberating when you're in a pivot and you're still in that in-between space and you're not quite sure where you're going. Please add to your strategy, not only space, but play. Now, the space, I really mean the time. This is time on your calendar. Space, that can be go play if you need to go play. But what I'm talking about is playing in your business. And I'm going to give you a couple of other words that I've heard people use to describe this, but you can pick whatever word feels good to you. I like the word experiment. You can play with something, you can experiment with something, you can practice something, you can take small steps, you can do, I'm sorry, not small steps. I really like the words messy small steps. And then what we used to use in corporate and what I've heard a lot of people use, like the formal businessy term, is beta test, right? You do that in technology. Test it out. Even if you don't know what you want to do, there's something you might want to do. There's something you might want to add. There's something you might want to tweak. Play with it and do it at a really small level, right? So if you think you might want to serve a different kind of audience, but you're not sure, reach out to friends, former colleagues, family members, people who you know that might be in that space or might know people in that space, and see if there's like a person that you could do an experimental work with, a single, if you're a coach, like a single session or a trial run period. If you have a product you want to test, is there a way to do it in a small way without like getting the manufacturer to make 9 million pieces, right? How can you do it at a small level? One of the things I always love to recommend to my clients who are thinking about creating a podcast, that's a popular thing that lots and lots of people want to do. And it's a beautiful way to express your creativity and to kind of like let that part of you evolve. But if you're not, but launching a podcast is a project and it requires effort. And if you're not sure, most people are like, oh, I'm not going to do it if I'm not sure, right? And so if you're not sure, where can you do your podcast in a different format that you've already got going on, so you can play with it, experiment with it, do it at some level, right? If I'm going to do a podcast, maybe I bring my podcast topics here to you on lives. I'd have the audio. It could actually become a podcast episode, or I would have the experience. This is really more for you than it is about creating a product or anything external. This is about you and your fulfillment, your ability to experiment and get creative so that you can land on that full clarity of, my pivot isn't just this, it's going to look just like this. And sometimes, you guys, maybe most of the time, it's really hard to find clarity on something when you're only using your brain, when you're only coming up with possible hypothetical scenarios in your head and bouncing ideas off of other people. Most of our learning in life comes from experiential learning. So where can you actually do the thing in a like beta test way, in a experimental environment, right? That's what scientists, that's all of science is, experiments. Test, fail, success, failure. This works, this doesn't work. Okay, so how do we put these together, right? Where can you do more of that in your business, in your pivot? Your pivot strategy has to have a space for you to play. So if you don't know who you want to serve going forward, start serving a few people, that types of audiences that you might want to serve. It doesn't mean you have to go out, to masses of audiences of 3 different types of people, but you can just go grab maybe 1, 2, or 3 different people to test with. you see where I'm going with this? You can even interview. A lot of times I like to interview people that I'm considering that represent a new audience that I'm considering working with, because you really get insights into not only their experience, but you can put on that hat of like, do I want to work with this person? Are there problems, things that I want to help them solve, right? Is this the place that I want to stay, space that I want to play in? And so enabling yourself to, like, in the same way that I recommend to my clients who already know exactly what they want to do, doing it in bite-sized chunks is always the best way to get, you know, your bigger bang for your buck in business, so that you're not having to do all or nothing in a small business. But if you're allowing yourself to experiment, if you're allowing yourself to test, to play, to try something out in a smaller, safer format, you get to use your genius. You get to see how you feel about it as a practitioner. And that information, that experience, you've got to live. There's a beautiful quote about, like, you have to live your way into the answer. So let yourself live your way into that answer without having to make big announcements to your audience that something's changing, because you're still figuring it out, right? Live your way into the answer. Play. When you're not sure, find a thing that you can play with. So find one client that you could play with. Maybe it's one session, maybe it's 1 week, maybe it's an interview, right? If you want to consider, learning a new skill, how can you play in that space? If you're not sure if you want to add like a certain modality or a certain, skill to your toolkit, how can you play in that? Do you maybe want to be a client in that modality so that you can receive it and see how it feels? Do you maybe want to start interviewing professionals who use that modality so you can understand what they love about it and what they don't, what they see the limitations are? Is that going to be a frustration for you? Or does that feel like a fun challenge, right? There's lots of ways to test things out without actually doing them full force. And I find this to be some of the most fun that I have with my clients, some of the most fun that I've had in my own business, of just playing with things. Let me think if I have another example. Like, think back to school. I didn't, but what did a lot of people do when they were in school in undergrad? They had internships, right? Like, that's a way to not only get on the job training and skills, but to like live that career for a minute, to see if you want to do it, to see if you want to go back to school and do more, to see if you want to graduate from college and go into that career. Like, where can you, and then the other thing, something that I did actually when I finished college, I, a little bit like backstory on me. So I was a psychology major. Surprise, surprise. I actually use my major every day. But I thought I wanted to be a psychotherapist. And a year later, I decided that wasn't for me. And I moved into corporate, and actually I was already in corporate working in like recruiting. And I found that HR and change management and consulting was a space in corporate that I was okay playing in. But in that time period, when I first got out of school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I wanted to be a psychotherapist, but I wanted to take a year off before I thought I was going to go to graduate school. And so I was like, year off, like full freedom to experiment. I don't know what the hell I want to do with my life. I'm 22. I just want to have fun. And I want to learn something in this year off that became an 18-year career. And so one of the things that I did in the first, I drove with a couple of friends. So I went to college in North Carolina and we moved to Los Angeles. I'd never been there. I had no earthly idea what to do there. I had no job. I had no idea. And I just started. This is the rebel traveler in me. We just went, 3 of us and a cat, drove our cars across the country, set up shop in an apartment in LA. And I was like, okay, I got to do something for work. So I started experimenting and I signed up with 2 temporary temp agencies. And I just started doing little 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 1 week jobs. to experiment with what it's even like to work in the real world, to what it's even like to work in the corporate world. And I worked for all different kinds of companies. And I started to learn what it was like to have that type of career. I was just experimenting, minimal effort, minimal commitment. That's the other thing. Super low commitment, guys, with your experiments. One client, one interview, one casual interview, 1 day to create, if you're thinking of writing a book, like start writing, see how it feels. Just write an article for something, or write an outline of what that book might be, or write one chapter. See how it feels. No, low commitment, no harm, no foul. If it doesn't go anywhere, you learned by the experience. So have a pivot strategy, my friends. If you're pivoting, you're not alone. There's so many people pivoting right now. If you want some support, I actually have a spot open. And I would love, love, love to support you with that. All you have to do is hop on a free discovery call with me. I'm super low pressure. I typically coach people on these calls. I'm really big on fit. I commit to you that I won't offer to coach you if I don't think I can help you, and if I don't think that we're a good fit. But I also have tons and tons and tons of coacher colleagues that are also coaches. And I always refer people out when they don't feel like a good fit. I usually have somebody who I know might be. So you can experiment by hopping on a call with me. But really and truly, I would love to support you in your pivot. It's what I've done my whole life and my whole career, and it's what I'm doing with my clients now. And I am pivoting as well. And I think it's a great example too. One more thing I want to say, that sometimes we feel that when we're in the middle of a business transition or we're in the middle of a pivot, we have to stop everything in order to figure it out so that we can move forward. And I see that's where a lot of people also get themselves slow their processes down and get themselves a little bit in a rut, because you can still make money. I'm still serving clients. I'm still making money while I'm creating my own pivot, which again is going to be really subtle for you guys, but really big for me in my own brain. But you can do more than one thing at a time. You can pivot and still serve your existing clients. And one of the ways that you can do that I think the way to do that without burning out, to do that while still honoring your pivot, and to do that without staying in that messy space for too long, is to have a pivot strategy. Have a pivot strategy that gives you space for creativity, that creates space in your calendar in general for that inactive creativity, so that your brain can be calmed down on the current state, which just opens up the opportunity to be thinking about the new. So space in general and creative space, and then let yourself play and experiment. That is going to be your way through. That is going to be how you figure out what you want to do. And I find that not only does this help you move through your pivot faster, but you guys know me, I'm so big on not building a business model around something that's short term, around something that you can't sustainably continue to repeat and execute over time. If it's not sustainable for you and your work style and your genius and your team, there's no point in doing it for a quick hit or a quick fix. I'm all about having a sustainable business model. And so when you experiment, you're also serving the future of your business. You're also serving your business sustainability. And you're also serving your future pivots, because you know that you can survive a pivot successfully. And you know that you can both serve clients or do whatever it is that you do while going through a pivot. You can do both. But the way to do it is to recognize you're in a pivot and honor that with yourself. You may need to tell your team, create some space for what doesn't need to keep going or what could be paused. Create space for your creativity. And then let yourself play. Play with what the new might have. Play, play, play. Experiment, experiment, experiment. it's so liberating. It's so fun. And the thing, it's for me, it's like, it's liberating for me as a creative, but I also find it so liberating because that was something that was really hard for me in corporate to move any. It was really, really hard and slow and long and required lots of justification and people's buy-in to do something different. And the beauty, my dears, is that you're running a small business and you're in charge and you get to do it the way you want. So liberating. You just get to do this the way you want. And you don't have to ask anyone else's permission around what you can do. You just get to do what you want, especially including the play. Because if you're not playing, if you're not enjoying what you're doing, I'm not saying you have to enjoy every element of your business all the time, for sure. It's a job. But if you're not enjoying what you're doing, what's the point? I know you started your business not only to help others in some way or to make an impact on the world, but to receive back joy and fulfillment. That is, I think, why we are here. We are here to create. We are here to co-create. And having a business is not just, it is a creative process and it's an energy exchange. I get so much joy from working with my clients. I also get money, right? And I give to them in return. It's got to go both ways. So letting yourself stay in that creativity, letting yourself play in your genius and see how you can keep moving more and more. This is truly, frankly, like an exercise in evolving more and more to be more you, to be more and more and more in your zone of genius, to be more and more and more doing what lights you up, because what lights you up goes out into the world and lights up others. So to do what you think you should do, or to do what you think you're supposed to do, or to do something that you love and then sort of limit it or hamper it in some way because of some way that you think business has to be, you can run your business however you want. My business is living proof. My clients' businesses are living proof. Everybody's setup is different. Business model, et cetera, matches their unique skill set, gifts, talents, businesses, team, et cetera. It's got to be what works for you. So let yourself play without limitations, without reality. Play, and you will live your way into the answer. And you will have so much more fun. And your pivot will be faster. And your pivot will bring you to your next level. It will drive you towards your next level. I promise, 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 promise. Let me know what questions you have. If you want to send me a private message, I love to receive private messages about how this resonates with you and what's going on in your business. I am talking about pivoting and change and being a rebel all this month and probably forevermore. So catch me again, same time next week. This month's workshop is the last Wednesday of the month, and it's all about being a rebel in your business. And it's so, so fun. So join me for that as well. I'll see you soon, guys. Lots of love.